What is the biggest bullet you have ever dodged? Years ago I was on a first meet for an internet date. We met at a bar and the bartender carded us. Even though we were both older, they were doing stings in the area, so he was carding every single person. Handed mine right over, but my date was an ass about it. The bartender checked mine and handed it back to me. He checked his, and rather than handing it back to him, he placed it on the bar right in front of me. It had the sexual offender stamp on it. The guy picked it up, looked at the bartender, looked at me, and then got up and walked out. I immediately googled him. He was on the registry and had been in prison for rape. Lesson learned. Always Google. The bartender and I are still friends. SEUAL offender stamp. What country do you live in? I have never heard of this. Grandma got a flat tire. Pulled over. As she was on the side fixing the tire, her car was hit and totaled. Right from her hands. She was okay. Sold my bar and grill business in August 2019. Sold my 3 restaurants in February 2020 for way more than they were worth. Now 2 have closed. Damn man. Just right before the pandemic hit US. Crazy luck. Yeah, I feel bad, but the guy who bought them was some huge millionaire, so I am sure he is okay still, lol. This one just materialized yesterday. Actually, about a year ago at my job I was offered to switch from my current team, where I was established for a few years, had seniority, etc., for a new department that just started to kick it off. Right processes. Basically start from square one. A lot more work for the same amount of pay. I figured duck it and went. Yesterday they announced that they just closed the physical HQ office for my old department, and everyone in that entire part of the company would have to either move to one of 14 random states that we can't pick. It's chosen basically by a roulette wheel for where you are going to a local office, or they are going to be fired on June 22nd. Thankfully, since I'm part of the new department, I was not included in that mandate. Phew. I was a teen driver not paying attention at an intersection at the crest of a hill with low visibility when the light turned green. The car behind me honked, and just as I was about to go, a truck barreled through the red light on the perpendicular road at decidedly ludicrous speed. If I had been paying attention and gone when the light turned green, I very likely would have been T-boned to death. Close street call I have ever had. I used to roller skate as a kid outside my house down a hill and never wore any kind of protection. Suddenly one day, before I go out, my older brother tells me I cannot leave unless I put on a helmet, which is weird since he has never cared before. Anyways, I do it, and that day, for the first time ever, I fell and landed on the back of my head so hard that the helmet cracked. That crack would have probably been my skull had I not wore it. I was out kayaking on a lake and several bullets whizzed by me. There was a distinct crack bus sound as it went by. I think some people were just out plinking in their backyard, adjacent to the lake, and did not think a backstop was necessary. This also happened to me a few weeks later when I was paddling on a small stream. Bullets whizzed by above the bank, just over my head. I do not think anyone knew I was there either time. Regardless, when you go out and shoot stuff, make sure there is a backstop. FFS. Also, I do not know how big the bullets were, so I'm unsure which was the biggest bullet dodged. I matched with a guy on Tinder who played for the Atlanta Falcons. He was really charming and seemed nice. He asked me to fly down to Atlantic City for Memorial Day weekend. Said he would pay for everything, airfare, hotel, food, etc. But I had never met him before, and he refused to give me his phone number. I was uncomfortable flying to meet a stranger, so I told him. 2 weeks later he was on the news for kicking and killing his girlfriend's dog. 2005, my friend and I evacuated New Orleans 2 days before Hurricane Katrina and drove to Mississippi with the little money we had. We were trying to decide on where to stay for the night, and it was between a mid-range hotel or the really cheap motel. Decided to spend a little more for the hotel. During the night, the eye of the storm came through Mississippi and flattened the roof of the motel we decided against. I was subletting an apartment in college and got zapped by the electric stove. Gave notice immediately and moved out with very clear reasons why I was moving out. The building burnt a few weeks later. Edit well this blew up. Thanks kind redditors. LOL I cannot stop imagining you getting a static shock and then just packing your shit. Eater I know that is not what happened but still laughing. Not me. A Dutch mate of mine living in Tasmania had to visit his sick mum in Amsterdam. Booking his flight online. He said to his wife, you know, I am sick of flying Malaysian Airlines. The food is shit. The hostess are miserable. Airlines cost more. But I am booking with Singapore. So, instead of dying on MH17, he was on a plane 40 km ahead of it. Edit just to clarify. He was on way home from AMS. Physically, a bus. I grew up in Bermuda, and since it is such a small island cars are limited to one per family, and everyone drives mopeds. I was driving into town, and came up to a red light behind a bus, as is tradition. I scooted around the bus, to be in the front of the line of traffic. Literally 2 seconds later a second bus smashed into the back of the first bus at like 30 miles per hour. I would have been pancaked. Without question. 100% dead. I just sat on the side of the road for a bit and thought about my mortality. Edit thank you for the awards. My only other Bermuda bus based encounter was driving home from my first job in the rain. An oncoming bus in the opposite lane went through a massive puddle and sent what looked like a tidal wave of water right at me. It literally picked me and my little Yamaha V50 right up and swept us off the road onto some grass. So I guess in the end it was me. One bus is one. It is crazy how 1 second life is in front of you, then nothing. I was in an accident in my motorcycle a few years ago. Last thing I remember before paramedics arrived was saying oh F you. It changes your perspective on life. I really needed a job and the manager at a dispensary in my area offered me a spot. I said no and 4 days later they were raided and everyone got arrested. I'm confused. Did they not have a license? Or are the feds just raiding dispensaries because it is technically still illegal by federal law? About 6 months after I left my ex, he got caught sexting a 12-year-old. He was 34 at the time. Edit I had the wrong age. He was 34 when it started. By the time he was in jail he was 36. My first serious boyfriend as an adult is now serving time in federal prison after being busted for distributing child pornography. Absolutely horrifying. I got on an intercity bus and almost sat in the middle, but moved and sat at the back. The bus later collided with a truck and got opened up like a tin can. If I had sat where I originally intended I would have been killed. I was late to my bus, and instead of running to catch it, I decided to miss it, and it was later hit by a speeding truck. Caught the one behind it and later saw the aftermath. 2 people died. My ex-girlfriend moved out of my house a day before the first lockdown in Spain. She previously pulled a knife on me. Dude. Thank God. I had 2 job offers in different states at the same time. The one I did not take was offering more money, but I just did not gel with the guy who would be my boss and really liked the guy who would be my boss at the lower offer. The better offer was in a state I had always wanted to live in for a company I admired, but something felt off, so I went with the lower offer. I ended up meeting my wife in the city of the lower offer. Meanwhile, the company that had given me the higher offer abruptly closed and laid off their entire staff with no severance, so if I had taken that I would have been stuck on the other side of the country with no job and no money. Attempted suicide. Ended up passing out in some bushes near the train station. Early the next morning, a girl I went to high school with who I barely knew saw me while she was boarding the train for a college interview early in the morning. She recognized me and told the conductor. He dismissed me as a junkie who just needed to sleep it off. She said, I know him. He does not do drugs or drink. Call 911 now. 3 days in a coma, etc. etc. I'm very grateful. Edit I expected this to be an into the other cathartic post that would go fully ignored. Thank you for showing your humanity, internet. I promise to update when things come together. Was driving on a freeway in the right lane when there was a sudden traffic jam ahead. I slammed on my brakes and was about to swerve onto the shoulder when I noticed that I wasn't sure the semi behind me could stop, and I didn't know how long we actually had a shoulder construction was happening at the time. Made the decision to rear end the car in front of me to stay off the shoulder. The truck went onto the shoulder, brakes squealing, and finally managed to stop when the back tires of their trailer were level with me. Good thing we weren't in a center lane and that we happened to have a shoulder at that moment. As a bonus, I stopped in time and didn't hit the car in front of me after all. Though I would have happily taken that hit and hopefully only would have shook up the people in front of me in place of literally being hit by a truck. A few months ago I was driving on I-80 at night when out of nowhere the biggest buck I'd ever seen is in the middle of my lane. I did exactly what you are not supposed to do and swerved, and thankfully managed to keep the rear of the car content with it. I literally shaved that buck's ass. My mirror was folded in. I know you are not supposed to swerve, but I drive a tiny little thing, and that buck's body would have gone through my windshield into my and my wife's face at 70 miles per hour. Not me, but my friend. We were in a bar, and she was talking to a dude she met on Tinder. When she turned around I saw him put something into her beer. I walked up, pretended to stumble, and knocked it out of her hand. Apologized. Told her I'd buy her next beer. And when we walked over to the bar I told her what he did. We left right after. Decided to grab a case of beer and play Mario Kart that night instead. I only tagged along because she asked me to, which I am always perfectly happy to do. Glad I did. When I was 16 I used a fake ID to go out clubbing. The legal age in Ireland is 18. So I passed for it and did it all the time. One night I felt sick and decided to leave my friends and go home. I knew there was a taxi rank in a small alley somewhere and was looking for it when an older guy 20s probably offered to show me. The alley he brought me down was not the taxi rank. Once I realized I tried to go back, but he pushed me against a wall and told me I wasn't going anywhere. I just remember not being able to scream. I just froze. It felt like forever, but probably only a few seconds later some guys I went to school with just happened to walk by the alley also looking for taxis and saw me. One of them yelled out my name, and then when he realized the guy had his arm across my throat he went mental. The guy jumped the wall at the end of the alley and I just burst into tears. My schoolmates took me home and made sure I was okay. I am in my mid-30s now, with 3 daughters, and I still shudder when I think of this. I am so sorry. That sounds traumatic. But gosh, I am glad your classmates were there. Do you still keep in touch with them? Yeah, we are all from a small town, so we all still have connections with each other. We've never actually spoken about it since, but whenever I saw him at school we would both smile at each other in a way that gave us comfort. He knows how grateful I was and still am. A year ago, almost to the day, I was offered a new job. It was exactly what I was looking for and was really excited. They told me they would email the contract, but after a week I had not had anything. After a lot of chasing they told me they did change the structure of the organization, so the position was not available. I have a month's notice for my current job, and if I had taken the job my notice period would have been after the cutoff date for furlough in the UK. The new job was in an industry that collapsed through the pandemic and the industry I work in has boomed. If I had received that email I would have probably been close to bankruptcy now. My first ever boyfriend dated me when I was 14 and he was 16. We only dated for 1 week before he took me into the woods and forced me to kiss him. I started to feel likey and broke it off that same day. 5 years later I found out that he was now in prison for raping 2 14-year-old girls. When I was 16 I had a crush on this dude who was 17 or 18. And he was trying to convince me to hook up him in the middle of the night cause he lived like 2 neighborhoods down from me. I was down till he mentioned that he wanted to do it in the woods, and I was like no thanks, never really talked to him again. I found out he wasn't alone that night. He had 0 plans of meeting me alone, and the friend he was with had a reputation for being a rapist. We didn't use the word rapist to refer to him. We called him creepy. But now that I am older I realize he was 100% a rapist. That is horrifying. Thank God you felt something was off. Didn't he end up going? We have instincts for a reason. Unfortunately, we often ignore them to avoid being seen as rude. That time I did not go along for the ride when a friend of mine was running weed years ago, back when it was more illegal. I was bored and unemployed at the time, and passed on this trip because I had to go to a job interview to be a zombie for Halloween festivities at an amusement park. I got the job. My friend got arrested and did 30 days in jail. That sounds like an awesome job. Got chucked off a horse. Hit the ground so hard I felt my soul leave my body. Started to cough up blood and was having trouble breathing within 30 seconds. Rushed to the hospital and the doctors were running down the hallway with me on a backboard. Doctors running is always a bad sign. I was sure I was dying. Come to find out that I broke 2 bones in my back and collapsed a lung. Once I was more with it, a nurse handed me my helmet and said, "It is a good job you were wearing this." It had been cracked almost in half. If I had not been wearing it, that would have been my head. And I did most certainly be dead or permanently disabled. Wear your helmet, kids. I was supposed to hang out with a couple of friends one night. We were going to go to a party that we were all invited to the weekend before. I asked to get off work early so I could go to the party. My manager let me go early, so I went to go find my friends. But I had a really bad feeling all day and it just kept getting worse. Instead of turning left to go to my friend's house, I went right and went home. I found out a few weeks later that they got busted with cocaine in their car. They were 16 and 17 at the time. I was 18. So I would have been screwed. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.